Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Always a pleasure to welcome back to the program the executive editor of the American Prospect, David Dayen. David, always a pleasure. I say this every time you're on, but if folks are not, A, reading the Prospect on a daily basis, and then B, supporting the Prospect, they're making two mistakes in one. And you guys never have a paywall, which I love. It really just, people should go support the American Prospect because there's just less and less. There's both just less and less journalism that's happening these days. And even if there was a lot of journalism happening, what you're doing at the Prospect is amazing. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you, sir. And the pleasure's all mine.
You guys are doing and you've done this in the past where you have like these, I don't know what you call them, verticals or something like this, whether it was the day one agenda, whether it was, I mean, sure. You've rolled out a new one, how pricing really works. It is fascinating and also creepily timely because I assume you've been this has been in the works for a while with both the price fixing from RealPage, this algorithmic thing that was first reported by ProPublica about 2 or 3 years ago, and the FTC prepping a lawsuit against the largest alcohol distributing company in the country, which we had talked about inadvertently, I guess, a couple of weeks ago. We'll get to that in a moment. But let's start with a piece that you introduced it with, which is this dynamic where companies are figuring out they can basically price gouge based upon your profile.
Yeah. So the overall issue looks at the many ways that companies have devised how they can maximize their revenue by increasing price. We saw this obviously over the last few years. And we think that sort of three things have come together as sort of a perfect storm for why this is happening. The first is market power, which we've seen over the last 40 years, industries becoming more and more concentrated. The second thing is technology. Companies have simply more information about their consumers, which enables them to target them in ways that uses their personal characteristics to change the price, sometimes individually change the price for each consumer. And then the third thing is the opportunity that was provided by the pandemic and the post-pandemic inflationary period that sort of unleashed a set of experiments on the public on whether it's dynamic pricing or what they call surge pricing, or things like shrinkflation, where you reduce the size of a package but keep the price the same, or things like the panoply of subscription pricing, which is, we kind of call it the inattention economy, where you're bombarded with so many subscriptions, you forget how many you have, and you just keep paying and paying and paying. There are all of these methods, and they're very sophisticated, they're very practiced, and they're very deliberate, that companies are using to basically use that information advantage they have over the consumer to gouge them. And this perfect storm has moved us into what we call in that piece an age of recoupment.
How much of those three columns, and each one may contribute or may not, but the market concentration, and the algorithmic pricing and whatnot. I mean, certainly in the context of rent, that is a huge driver of inflation. But also, I mean, early on, I just remember in the wake of the pandemic, going to get my bike fixed and getting maybe it was just like an inner tube, and the guy was like, you know what, I can't get these inner tubes.
Right.
Because my distributor won't sell them to me because he says he doesn't have any. But I go on to Amazon, and just as an experiment, I put in there like 99. I want to get 99 of these tubes. and they had them, and he speculated. He's like, I think Amazon is just basically Bigfooting everybody, and that's a function of market concentration in terms of driving inflation.
There was a report that came out by the Federal Trade Commission about just that particular issue, that large stores, big box stores like Walmart and Amazon, during the pandemic, were telling their suppliers, you have to supply us first. You have to give us what we need before you can go on. And if you don't, we'll penalize you or we'll knock you out of the market. And because they're so big, the suppliers felt the need to, supply those big box stores to the exclusion of everybody else. And this, and then
there's no price competition on that at all, because
that obviously creates pricing power and creates the ability for potential gouging. And so this is something that the government is aware of. The FTC, it's a great report they put out about it, and it does contribute. Now, since these supply chains have eased and we've seen inflation come down, what's interesting is the profit margins have stayed exactly the same. And we feel like that's a function of these new pricing strategies that without them, inflation would be down probably to the level of the 2% Fed target, and they would probably be dropping interest rates at this point. The fact that there is just more data collection, there's more surveillance, there's more out there that companies know about you, and they can exploit that information to target you on price.
All right, and one of those, I mean, you did a deep dive, or at least the first of the deep dives, I guess, is this notion of one person, one price, this type of targeting of pricing, which essentially, it is a form of gouging, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the technical term that economists use for this, and they don't necessarily use it in a bad way, but they call it first-degree price discrimination. This is personalizing pricing based on your particular characteristics or circumstances, and really based on your willingness to pay. And it's important to make a distinction between willingness to pay and ability to pay. Those are not the same things. Sometimes economists conflate them. They say, oh, well, this is just based on your ability to pay. So if you're poorer, you will pay less for the same product, and if you're rich, you'll pay more. And this is just a progressive system. That's not how it works. It's based on your characteristics, and some of them have nothing to do with income. One of the things, this is not in this piece, but in a future piece that we're going to write, is that Uber, it has been found by there was a study in Belgium where it sent two people out. They were coming from the same place. They were going to the same place. One of the phones had 84% battery. The other phone had 12% battery. The phone with a low battery was charged more. And you can imagine that that's because of the desperation of the situation. If you have a low battery, you better book that ride soon, or you're going to be stranded. And so those are the types of things that can happen. And it gets much, much more sophisticated as you go down the line. So this idea of first-degree price discrimination or personalized pricing, it really was sort of a pipe dream of economists forever. They want to maximize, company surplus and make sure that they're charging exactly what people are willing to pay, and differentiating it among people. Now, with the sophistication of the data collection and the isolation of the customer, those two factors, that pipe dream is becoming more of a reality.
What do we have on the books in terms of price discrimination from like a statutory perspective federally? I mean, is there anything? And if so, is it just being exploited here because this is being done in an algorithm and it's not like, oh, you look poor, so I'm going to charge you differently than the guy that's coming in with the Rolex or whatever?
This is a brand new and emerging kind of field. And so there isn't a full architecture of regulatory guardrails for this kind of stuff. However, there are possibilities, and we're going to get into this in future editions of this series, for regulators to get involved. So unfair, deceptive, or abusive acts and practices, or UDAP, is something that consumer protection agencies like the CFPB, like the Federal Trade Commission, have in their arsenal. A recent series of cases by the FTC has labeled data broker practices as unfair practices. So it's a hop and a skip to say, well, if a company is collecting data on me and using that to change my price relative to other consumers, then that's unfair. And that could be the beginning of an architecture to actually regulate these practices.
I mean, the easiest way for me to, because I think there's some who will argue like, well, it's just, you don't have to pay for it if you don't want to get it. And some people are getting a discount and some people are, paying more because it's worth more to them. And it's just like sort of, the market just comes down to this really powerful company and you as an individual. But the easiest way to know on some level that there's something fundamentally wrong is that they're not going to advertise this is the way that we do our prices.
Yeah.
Right? Like they don't want you to know that I'm going on and buying something and I'm paying twice what Emma's paying for it, or vice versa.
And historically, what we have seen is whenever these schemes are caught, the companies immediately stop them, beg forgiveness, and try to say that they'll never do it again. Amazon in the 2000s, the early 2000s, started randomly charging different prices for their DVDs. And people eventually figured this out. And Amazon said, oh, we'll never do that again. We'll never do differential pricing again. We're very, very sorry. The problem is now, I mean, obviously, if you're in line and you're in a public place and there's a publicly posted price, it's difficult to do personalized pricing, right? If you are in line and you're being charged $3 and the guy behind you is being charged $4, the guy behind you is going to be pretty pissed off. But there are now ways to atomize and isolate the consumer. I use the example of the McDonald's app. Do you use the McDonald's app?
I do not use the McDonald's app. I did read about it in your story, however.
50 million people on the McDonald's app worldwide.
Really?
It offers much bigger discounts than the advertised price in the store. And the reason for that is that they're trying to get on your phone. They're trying to get your information. They're trying to build market share for this app so that they can atomize the customer. And it's made by a company called Plexure. And I was able to see a slide presentation of how Plexure talks about its business and how it uses personalization. And this one slide really struck me, and we put it in the piece, of all of the ways that they use first-party data, the collection of your information from the app, that goes into how they target their offers. So we're talking about your food preferences, your ordering habits, your time of day, the location, the weather, your social interactions. And then there was a little thing that said key moments, i.e. payday, right? So it maybe because the app is attached to a credit card, and that credit card is maybe a debit card that it knows how much you're getting at a particular time. It might know your payday. And if it knows your payday, on Thursday, the day before you get paid, maybe it offers you an Egg McMuffin at $3.50. And then after you have some money in your pocket, the day after you get paid, maybe it offers you for $4.50. And that doesn't sound like a lot of gouging, but Plexure claims they have 500 million interactions with people every day. So it adds up. And and then you combine that first-party data, what they're collecting from you from the app, with all this other data that they have from your browser, from your email, from your other apps, from your subscriptions, from your travel data, from your geolocation, all of these other things to create what is called an identity graph. And now they have so much information on you that they probably know what you're going to order before you do. And if they know that, then they can target particular prices at particular times on particular people.
Did I misread, or do they have access to what, if I'm attaching my my Visa card to my McDonald's app, do they have access to what I've purchased on that Visa card as well?
They potentially do.
They can buy that from a third party.
They could get it from a third party. They could get
they may
all kinds
know
of
that,
financial
like,
data.
okay, this guy, he usually buys, lunch, 4 days a week, and it's usually $20. So instead of selling them a $5 burger, we can actually bump it up to $7.50 or something.
They might know more. It might be more fine grained than that. They might know that between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock is when you get your lunch on Thursdays, because you have 2 jobs and you're going between one job and the other, and that's your 1 hour of the day to get lunch. Or you're between classes, and that's your 1 hour when you decide to get something to eat. So they can target offers in that window that are very particularized. I mean,
because they know you don't necessarily have other options. You're not going to be able to go buy somewhere else to get the food. You're going to need this, whatever it is.
Wait, hold on. Slow down for 1 second. I need to just flesh this out for a sec. How does this not violate your contract that you signing when you create a credit card with your bank or with the credit card company? Are there no privacy protections that preclude this kind of activity?
Have you read that credit card information that you signed with your bank?
No.
I got my first bank account when I was 16 or whatever, so I guess I wasn't reading the fine print. But
are you reading them now?
Maybe I need to be. I mean, I'm shocked by this.
There's a tremendous amount of data available, both through the first party collection, which allegedly involves consent because you're on the app and so you're using it, and so that there's this implicit consent attached to that, and the other data that's around that can be purchased, that can be witnessed, that can be collected. And the architecture is there, is the point. The architecture is there for this kind of personalized pricing, whether it's through a web browser, whether it's through your phone, whether it's through your smart speaker, through your smart TV. I talk about that in the piece, that there are now these personalized ads and offers that are being sent directly through your television set. So there is no one price. There's just what you're getting through your television set. It might be different than the house next door to you. Walmart is currently trying to buy Vizio, which is the smart TV manufacturer. Why would a retailer want to buy a TV company? The reason is that Vizio has this smart task function, which is a streaming TV function, and Walmart can use that function to target and personalize ads.
I guess I just was a little bit more, I'd like to think I'm cynical enough, but I had more expectations of your literal bank and finances.
You've never bought something on a card and then started seeing ads for it?
I have no idea. I mean,
you'll notice it now.
Now I'll notice it. Okay, sorry, keep going.
I mean, the problem is that there's so much data out there that's available to be extracted that we don't know where it comes from. It could be that you were browsing that particular item before you bought it. It could be that you sent an email to somebody and said, "Hey, I just got this new coffee maker." There's almost no limit to the data that is available to determined companies that really want to know a lot about you. This all started way back in the 70s and 80s with a company called Catalina Marketing that, you know how you get when you go through the grocery store, they put coupons at the end of your sales receipt, and the coupons seem strangely attached to the things that you just bought. That was Catalina Marketing. That's what they did in the 70s. First, it was based on the basket of goods you had. Then you started getting loyalty cards, right? You get discounts if you got use the loyalty card for Kroger or Albertsons or whoever. And now it's a full purchase history of everything that you've ever bought at that grocery store. And they can use that to target offers, to refine their pricing and so forth. There's now digital versions of that. I know when I go to my Ralph's, there's this thing called the digital deal where you can get a steep discount on a particular good, but you have to hit a QR code and get it onto your phone and then virtually clip the coupon on your phone. So now they're on your phone, right? So now there's a whole other world of data they're available to get. This is the next frontier. This is where pricing is going, in my view. And I don't think government has fully caught up to the implications here.
And with a lot of these things, even like my analogy would be like the TV industry where, the unions strike and they basically make a deal that would have worked 5 or 10 years earlier. But the industry has moved on to figure out how to screw over, you're
getting those deep residuals now, but
100%. Right. Like I'm convinced that's what also just happened with all the streaming stuff. Like they've figured out they have a different model that they're moving towards. And the deal they made would have been the deal that, would have helped actors and writers, 8-10 years ago.
Right.
We can't even really, it's hard to sort of contemplate like where this goes, because it also feels to me that like there is I can't, in the back of my head, and maybe it's just because I'm talking to you, and knowing your reporting history, but I can't help but think like there's going to be derivatives of this data information. Like somehow this is going to end up being securitized, and there is going to be some like we're going to end up paying for either the speculation or the arbitrage that is going on, where people say like, well, this technology is such that we're going to sell futures on what we think the pricing is going to be, 6 months from now. Like, I just feels like this is, once this gets so algorithmic that someone's going to step in and figure out like, we can securitize this in some fashion.
Well, and your reference to sort of fighting the last war is many ways the key question for policymakers. So, in this country, we have outsourced all of these questions about inflation and about pricing policy to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, through its interest rate channel, is the one entity that is supposed to govern these particular issues. But if supply and demand isn't the whole ballgame, if it's as much about what a company knows about you as it is whether you want that product, there's a whole different architecture of dealing with pricing that opens up, and it has to be a whole of government approach, whether it's using the FTC and consumer protection statutes, this unfair or deceptive practices statute, whether it's about antitrust policy, because if you don't have the pricing power, this isn't as potent, whether it's including public options, right? I mean, we are seeing in real time the destruction of the tax return monopoly through the use of direct file through the IRS. That could be another way to deal with this policy. Tax policy could be another way to deal with this if it suddenly is not as attractive to get windfall profits out of your consumers. So there are going to have to be a variety of strategies that are going to have to be tested and put into place to deal with this emerging change in the consumer marketplace.
The irony is that ostensibly the reason why the Fed has the exclusive purview of dealing with prices, right? Like, I mean, at least ideologically. I mean, we know Nixon had price controls, and so we know the government has the ability to do these type of things. But the reason why sort of like the conventional wisdom that we should leave this to the Fed is because they have this sort of blunt instrument that supposedly, doesn't target any specific industry or players, but rather sort of like has a blanket effect on the economy, as it were. We're going to make money more expensive, and therefore it's going to lower inflation in some fashion. But the irony is that like these innovations they're doing the exact thing that supposedly you don't want the Fed to do in terms of like targeting. Like, there's no market. If I'm getting a separate price than Emma's getting, there's no market here.
Right. Exactly. And the opening anecdote of this entire series is Jerome Powell in front of the Senate Banking Committee, and Sherrod Brown starts asking him about these pricing strategies. And it's like Jerome Powell didn't want to be in the room. He's like, look, pricing's important. It's a key function of our markets, and as long as it's fair and as long as customers are informed, I don't want anything to do with that. And that's that kind of reveals that the Fed isn't going to be any help here. And if we want to establish fairness as a principle in pricing, we're going to have to find other entities within our regulatory structure to deal with that.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.